Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show, and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We're here today with Derek Wyszynski, Director of Sales for Commercial Products at Parallels. Derek, how's it going today, man?
Oh, it's going great. Thank you for having me on. I've really been looking forward to it, and hopefully it's an informative and at least interesting conversation.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be. You and I have connected a little bit in the past, and we had some great conversations on sales, share some backgrounds coming out of the office technology space at different points in our career. So we had some great conversations. So I'm really excited to jump into this topic of selling to different ICPs and, how salespeople and sales leaders can approach this a little bit more strategically from the way that they approach it, the sales training that they're going after, and all those sorts of things. But before we get into the heart of the conversation, I'd love for you to take a second and let folks out there know what you and the team at Parallels are up to these days.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, well, Parallels, as many people may know, is a leader in virtualization software for the Mac environment. And the basic 30-second deal is what we do is we make Windows IT administrators fall in love with Macs. Macs are historically hard to manage on enterprise networks. I've never met a Windows administrator that liked to see those silver machines as they were coming in the door. And what we do is we provide a software management tool that works within Windows and through Windows administration consoles to manage a Mac just like you manage a PC. Point, click, right click, push, pull, same thing. So the things that they do all day long, they're able to do on the Macs, and it makes IT managers fall in love with Macs.
I love that. That's a good summary. Been familiar with the product in the past, just from a personal perspective, but I can definitely, see the value there on the enterprise level because I've been, dealt with those IT administrators before. And I know what you're talking about, bringing those little silver machines in and them not liking it can be a pain. So, that kind of leads us right into, recently you made a shift when you came onto Parallels in, the market that you were selling to. So tell us a little bit about your personal journey recently and what you've been seeing in transitioning from selling to one ideal customer profile to another.
Absolutely. So that's recently I was at a startup for the last couple of years that we were selling directly to our ICP at the time were sales leaders and salespeople, people within the B2B space. And we were a Salesforce partner. So our application was really a sales enablement tool. And so we were selling to that space. And I left that organization and I came back to my first love, which was selling directly to IT. And I'd spent a large part of my career as an IT professional, and then I moved into selling to IT professionals. And having spent the last 4 or 5 years selling to the sales space, having moved back into IT, I was incredibly, I wouldn't say shocked. It was interesting to learn, and I was interested to learn how much not only has the ICP how different the IT director ICP is different from the sales leader ICP, but also how different the IT ideal customer profile in 2018 is different than it was in 2008 or 1998, which is a real big shock. And I think that that's where really I've been playing catch up and drinking from the proverbial fire hose, understanding my ICP in order to communicate well enough that they'll buy something from me.
Yeah. So you were kind of playing double catch up, switching from sales leaders to IT leaders, but you couldn't just transfer, plug and play what you knew about IT directors from 10 or even 20 years ago, obviously.
No, it's when I was selling to IT people and when I was an IT person, Netscape was the browser of choice. So things have changed a little bit, right? So it's so the things that I knew how to do back then don't necessarily work in 2018 day and age.
Right. Well, one of the things that we talked about when we were going back and forth about this idea of changing ICPs and changing what ICP that you're selling to, Derek, was, looking at sales training. And, there are a lot of folks out there who offer somewhat generic sales training or maybe sales training that doesn't quite fit. And yourself leading a team, this is something that you've thought about quite a bit. So tell me a little bit about, what you think sales leaders and sales practitioners out there need to be thinking about in lining up their training with the ICP that they're selling to.
Really good question. And you're talking to someone here who has been I've solution sold, I've spin sold, I've challenger sold, I've Sandler sold. I've been through, everything. I might as well have a Zig Ziglar tattoo, right? It's like, so I've been through sales training from the ground up and understanding it and consuming it. And the thing that I've come to believe is that when you are selling to a particular ICP, whatever that ICP is, your sales training, your sales trainer, the people that you are investing in to help you speak to that ICP should have direct experience with that particular vertical or that particular customer profile. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen someone who has excelled in selling to accounting managers come in and try to go ahead and tell someone who has hospital administrators as an ICP how to sell their widget or how to sell their what's it. And invariably, it either doesn't work or doesn't work as prescribed because the purchase process, their motivations behind the why they need things or the problems that they have are just drastically different. So that's kind of so for me, if I were a sales leader looking for sales training right now, I'd number one, look for someone that has at least some vertical experience in the vertical that my team is in, because that's invaluable right now because they're just so different.
Right. I'm a big believer in that, sales skills can transfer from industry to industry, but the nuance within that really, there can be a big swing from right to left within that, right? Like, if you understand how to sell to people's emotions, that transfers over, but that doesn't mean that everything else about your processes and the way that you go about applying that kind of generic principle is just, you flip the switch and turn it on.
Right, exactly. And and you and I at different points in our career have worked in the office technology space. And for those that are listening, office technology is the term that people sell copiers use when they don't want to say they sell copiers. Right. They say they sell office technology. And the ability, and the not only the value proposition, but the way you communicate, the way you go ahead and provide a return on investment conversation, the way you do a proof source for a 60-month lease on a printer device is absolutely 100% different than the way you communicate to an IT person who is buying software as a service from you for $10 a license on a monthly subscription, right?
Yep.
It is drastically different. And like I said, it's not only motivations, it's the deliverable is different, the expectations are different. You and I remember that selling office technology, they get in a 5-year lease with us, they're in a 5-year lease. They're not going to get out of it other than if the fact maybe your company goes out of business, that's how you can break the lease. But you're in a lease. Yep. You're selling software as a service. You have to make that sale really month to month. You have to convince them to not cancel their subscription month to month. And that's a completely different environment. So how do you, and then you have, when you're selling software as a service, and let's just take this as a for instance, your barrier to entry is much lower. It's much different to go ahead and get someone to agree to spend $10 a month for 10 users for your software than it is for them to expend $25,000 to go ahead and buy a production print device that they put in their break room.
Today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing. Delphix, a big data platform, had hired an agency to manage their Google ads a few years ago, but they weren't seeing the results they wanted to see. Being such a technical B2B solution, they set out to find a team that could take on their challenge. After countless proposals, they found the perfect fit, Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. In just 1 week after launching Directive's campaigns, Delphix saw their lead volume double and their cost per lead drop by 60%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
So, as a sales leader yourself, Derek, we were talking about this a little bit offline. What are some of the things that you suggest, or maybe you've implemented for your team that you suggest for them to do if they're making this sort of transition? I'm sure, you've hired people that have been switching industries, those sorts of things. It's not like it's an insurmountable wall if you're doing things the right way. So what do you suggest to them to kind of set themselves up for success?
Great. Well, this is good advice for the individual contributors, but it's also good for sales leaders who are moving from vertical to vertical. The very first thing you need to do, and I know it sounds like second nature, but really you'd be amazed how many people don't do it, is your first 30 days, you have to immerse yourself in your product or solution offering. You have to understand how it works from development, from the mind of the developer to the drawing board, to the actual drafts and the betas and everything else out into production, how that works. You need to know, not from just a sales perspective of what the value proposition is, but you need to know what your widget does and why it does what it does. And you need to know the history of the widget and how it's evolved over time. That's the first thing. In parallel, to use a term, what you have to do.
Huh?
Well, actually, it was intended, but yes. So in parallel, what you have to do is you have to then immerse yourself in your existing customer base and have conversations with them. Have conversations with people that have purchased your widget, the widget that you represent now, and talk to them. Why did you buy our widget? Why did you not choose X company's widget? What about our widget keeps you buying our widget? Why do you like our service and support? What works? What doesn't? What's your day like? What do you spend most of your day doing? How many hours a day do you spend on our widget? Do you spend 1 hour a day or 8 hours a day? What does your day look like? And so when you understand that, when you understand the day-to-day life of your ICP, and then you understand in parallel what your solution offers to that particular individual, at that point, after that 30 days, you can then come to the table and start offering strategic or tactical advice or ideas on how to do things. I push back on sales leaders and salespeople that come in from one vertical and say, hey, I've got 52 ideas on what we should do on day number 2 after they filled out all their HR paperwork, right? It's like, I think you need to go ahead and understand a little bit, because what other industry would we do that? There's no other industry that, a doctor, coming in, is to a new hospital and to a new process and new procedures. And I can say, well, I'm going to do things all differently. I'm not going to follow any of these procedures. I'm not going to wash my hands. because you guys do that here, but I didn't do that when I was being a doctor in Kuala Lumpur, and it was just fine. It's like, but no other position does that other than sales and sales leadership. So I really do think the two things: solution knowledge, understanding it from the ground up, and speaking to your current customers to really understand the ICP. Because if you're loaded, if you've got both those guns on your hip, you can walk into any saloon and hold your own.
I love it. And I love what you pointed out there too, Derek, is, the first questions, like you said, might seem second nature to folks of, why did you buy it? Why did you choose our company? Those are great things to know. But, what you alluded to there and touched on some questions was, what I call those next level questions with the customers. What's your day like? Where does this fit into the grand scheme of things? Because now you're understanding the psychology of that buyer, not just why did they say yes? Why did they say no? What do they like? Those are good things to know, but I think those are a starting point. So if you are taking this advice, take it to the next level with those questions.
No, you're exactly right. Because one of the big mistakes we make as salespeople, and I'll say we because I've made it in the past as well, is the fact that I concentrate on me. Because, of course, we're all numbers driven, and we're driven by quotas, and we're driven by the things that we want to say. So development comes out with a new product, a new widget, right? And marketing markets it, and they write up all this great stuff, and they fill our heads with all the value proposition and everything else like that. So then I go out in sales, and I do cold calling, and I knock on doors, and I send tweets, and I do everything else, social sell, I combo call, I do all these other things in order to go ahead and talk to people about my widget or about my what's it. The fact is if I don't know that only 10% of their day is dealt with the problem that's solved by my widget, I don't know how to communicate to them. Because to me, it's the most important thing in the world. Because it's what pays, because the revenue from it pays my daughter's braces, right? So it's like, that's what's important to me. But if I don't understand where I fall in the grand scheme of things for my customer as a supplier, as a vendor, as a partner, then I don't really know them at all. And if if I'm only 10% of the solution, then I need to understand that, and I need to communicate them that I can take care of that 10%, and that's 10% less than they need to deal with. But it's like, that's the kind of thing I need to know.
Yeah. And I think buyers are looking for salespeople that get that understand them a little bit better. It takes a little bit more work, but the good news is we have more avenues to understand things about, our buyers and the buyer personas that we're selling to than ever before. So all of that being said, when you stepped in, you started doing some of this, you encourage your reps to do it, and it led to maybe some strategic decisions after you kind of took the first 30 days to do this and didn't just say, this is what we're doing on day number 2. Tell us a little bit about, one or two of those to provide us, I think, with some good takeaways to apply this a little bit.
Absolutely. One of the first things we did after my first 30 days here, after me consuming and understanding what our product suite did, and me talking to all of the customers that we talk to, both in person, over the phone, over WebEx, those types of things, is I changed the way we communicate to our customers during something simple as the renewal process. And the way we had automated messaging and communicating to people and to have those further conversations. So we went back to the drawing board. There were like 4 or 5 different automated emails with hyperlinks and everything else that were sent from the CRM. We rewrote those all with customer input, all understanding the way they needed to be communicated to and the information that was valuable for them to be communicated. And so that was one of the very first things we did. And we got almost immediate feedback on that from customers, like, hey, thanks for the email, or hey, they clicked the link, or they never clicked the link before, right? And they were clicking links in it. And so understanding, that was one of the very first things, understanding that. Number 2, the way Parallels deals a lot with channel sales. So, we sell our product suite through like CDW and Tech Data. So if you're buying hardware and software from those companies, you can buy Parallel software through your channel partner, through your channel provider. Right. Well, one of the other things that we identified, when you're selling through the channel, as anybody who has a channel knows, they're also a customer of yours. So you have a customer who's the end user of your software, and then you have a channel customer, the CDW rep, that's out there that's actually selling your product and talking to their particular customers, right? So we changed the way we communicated and the way we onboarded them. We had a very specific, product-specific way of onboarding them that really delved into the meat and potatoes of what the product did and everything else like that. And what I discovered by talking to them, what they needed to know is not so much what the product did, but how introducing the product could help them meet their bottom line, which was to go ahead and say, it's like, so what does selling parallels do for your quota attainment? What does selling parallels do for you making your number? How does selling parallels allow you to sell more Macs, to sell more Mac devices, which is a higher ticket item that increases your revenue? How can you do that? So by just doing some tweaks and changing that way with certain channel providers, over the last quarter, we drastically changed. We deal with two specific channel providers, and one of them has been a perennial number 2 for a very long time. But we focused on them my first quarter here, and for the very first time, they topped our other channel provider as far as the amount of revenue and the number of actual sales and touches that they were able to have with our product suite. And we drew a direct line in coordination from retooling that information, the way we delivered it, and then the way we communicated and onboarded their new reps and helped them with their training. So so there were some identifiable, really quantifiable outcomes from just doing, like you said, the simple stuff that you think would become second nature, the dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
I love it. Well, Derek, thank you for sharing a little bit of your story and this take. And it sounds like it's been, a good practice for your team. So if folks listening to this would like to reach out to you to ask any follow-up questions or stay connected with you, what's the best way for them to go about doing that, man?
The best way is, obviously you can get to me through Parallels at derekw@parallels.com. But the best way is I have a Twitter handle @RealSalesAdvice. All one word, Real Sales Advice. So you can contact me via Twitter. It's all about sales. It's all about sales process. So please, you can go ahead and message me, follow me. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. But definitely, probably Twitter is the quickest way to get a hold of me because obviously, just like everyone else, I have that leash called my smartphone, and it's always on.
I love it. Well, Derek, thanks for being on the show, man. This has been great.
Hey, thanks so much, and thanks for asking. And I really do appreciate this conversation, and you have yourself a great rest of the day.
Becoming a thought leader doesn't just happen. If you want to build a strong personal brand and extend your reach online and offline, you need a plan. Want help developing yours? Check out Impact Summit. This one-day event is bringing together best-selling authors, professional athletes, influential CEOs, and emerging entrepreneurs, all for one purpose: to equip you to lead, influence, and inspire. Whether you're looking to build a lasting legacy with your business or extend the reach of your brand, Impact Summit speakers will share inspiring stories and practical lessons to help you on your way. Did we mention a session on launching and growing a podcast? You guessed it. You'll hear from Sweetfish Media's own James Carberry during that session. You won't want to miss all of these influencers and leaders coming together in Salt Lake City on October 13th. Ready to learn more? Check out influencerinc.co/Impact Summit. B2B Growth listeners can get 15% off the price of their tickets for this event by using the promo code SWEETFISH. SWEETFISH. So use that code, get your tickets today, and get ready to grow your brand and your influence at Impact Summit 2018.